just keep an eye on Isaac Quaynor. I'm not saying he's going to get dropped this week. I'm not saying he's going to get dropped the next week, but he's not playing the way he did last season. Let's talk about matchups for Jeremy Cameron later in this one because I've got an interesting one for you, and it's not Darcy Moore and it's not Billy Frampton. While we're still quite efficient going inside our own 50 when we get the ball moving, we're not getting it there enough. We're being stifled in our back half. We're giving you a Monday preview for the Geelong game so we can turn our backs on what occurred on Friday night, see what we need to do to turn this around as we come up against a side who's found their form once again and just continue to stay somewhat relevant. Geelong. Well, last time we played them in 2023 was the last game. I think it was round 22. And it was funny, such as a disparity of where we're at now versus then, and same with Geelong. Last time we played them, they didn't make finals. They were on the way down and were, I guess, on this inevitable slope. And we thought that's the end of it and they're finished. So on and so forth. And then they come out 7-0 to start this year. And then they've had a little form slump and have since beaten Essendon and Hawthorn in the last 2 weeks to return to some sort of form. And now Collingwood are in a similar situation where we look chalked and we're on our way out, and hopefully we don't follow the trend of Geelong last year, look old, look like we're on our way out, and then lose. I'd like to try and get an immediate reaction from the boys and try and salvage what is left in this season. And what is left in this season is still a lot, guys. There's still finals, top four still there. Results continue to fall our way outside of our own games. Ideally, we'd like to be winning our games and not having to put our fate in other matchups. But that is what's happening right now. And it's slightly, I guess, complementing us or helping us sort of keep a glimmer of hope, a glimmer of optimism where we're still in the hunt. I don't know what it is, what we're hunting for, but we're still in the hunt. That's what I feel. And as disappointing as Friday was, we know how quickly 7 days can change the vibe, the outlook, the precedent that is set for what is to come in the last 6 weeks. But from that game against Essendon, we found that Myercheck is going to be out for the rest of the season, most likely with a torn pectoral surgery. And fortunately for Darcy Cameron, did visit the hospital after the game, but was cleared with just bruised ribs and is a test for the game against Geelong. And just quickly touching on that game from last year as well, some of the player performers that we want to highlight. Josh Dacos had 38 disposals, was probably one of his best games of his career. It was a career high in his disposal count. Old mate Murph had 6 intercept marks, but we're not going to have that there. And funnily enough, Checkers had a career high 5 goals against Geelong last time we met. So that is not going to be there on Friday night either. On the other side, you have Jeremy Cameron kicked 7 on us and had 12 shots on goal. Let's talk about matchups for Jeremy Cameron later in this one because I've got an interesting one for you, and it's not Darcy Moore and it's not Billy Frampton. Patrick Dangerfield was the highest rated player for that round, let alone the game. He had 26 touches, 12 score involvements, 16 contested possessions, and 9 clearances. So if there's ever a game where Danger is going to lift beyond what his age restricts him to sometimes, there's going to be these type of games. And he's looked very good in his last couple games since returning from injury. He's actually had quite a good year, I guess, from the outlook, right? From the get-go. He's just had a bit of luck when it comes to his body letting him down. And then finally, Tom Atkins had 34 disposals, 19 contested possessions, and 8 clearances. So that was the story that came out of that game from last year. And obviously, we've just mentioned the injuries that we're going to have to deal with. Let's move into some stats from the last 5 games for both the Pies and the Cats. The Pies are now bottom 4 for contested possessions, which 6 weeks ago, we were a top 4 side. Going into that Bulldogs game, we were that side when it came to contested possessions. Bottom 8 for clearances, and again, we were a decent clearance side halfway through the year. Things have changed, and it can't be undermined how much these injuries have hindered our ability to create some sort of stability. There's too much volatility in the team, and then you tie that in with players not playing well, effort missing. Something's got to give. So that's been the story of 2024. maybe an element of complacency from a mental standpoint. Our mental fortitude hasn't been there. And it's starting to show more and more now. But like I said, as always, you just don't know what can happen in sport. If sport was predictable, no one would be watching. And we're bottom 2 for conceding inside 50s while also not being able to get the ball inside our own 50, bottom 4 for that category. So you tie those two in together, they are critical stats. You want to add more to it, well, not only are we conceding a bunch of inside 50s, we're conceding a lot of scoring shots on those inside 50s. So where we were once able to hold it down in the back line and rely on Darcy Moore, Nathan Murphy, Jeremy Howe, Braden Maynard, the team defense as well, by extension, that, I guess, fortress in the back line isn't there anymore. We're conceding these inside 50s and subsequently conceding scores from it. And then while we're still quite efficient going inside our own 50 when we get the ball moving, we're not getting it there enough. We're being stifled in our back half. That's the reality, and that is what is hindering us the most. The next worst thing, or the most concerning thing, I would say, is the fact that we're bottom 2 for the amount of uncontested possessions we have conceded. I mentioned it going into the Essendon game that we can't allow this to happen the way it happened against Gold Coast, and the same thing happened. So while the Hawks aren't a massive disposal team, not a massive uncontested possession team, it's something we need to rectify. But maybe it's the team we got. We're not super fast out of the middle. We don't have the most defensively minded players in the middle. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't think that's going to be a fix this year. We're going to have to deal with that. And just for reference, last year we were top 8 for the least amount of uncontested possessions conceded. So there's a reference there. Again, obviously it's important to emphasize that not one single stat or metric you can't reduce the narrative to those singular stats, but I'm just trying to paint a picture for you guys as much as possible. The eye test is very important. I always say that. Let that be your greatest judgment, and then use the stats as a formula to back up what you're seeing on the field. That's how I approach these typically. Now let's move to Geelong. In their last 5 games, they're top 2 for marks inside 50. So they're moving the ball well and getting good looks with good leads being presented by the likes of Jeremy Cameron, so on and so forth. They've looked the better side with Tom Hawkins out of the squad. I think they obviously gain leg speed in a Gary Rowan, who has been monumental in his comeback. He's been kicking goals. His marks on lead. His leading patterns are elite. So that's something the Pies have to knuckle in on, but it's going to be hard if we don't collectively work as a team to nullify that. We can't expect our back 6 to stop that. It needs to start from our forward line and then our midfield line, and then of course finally our defenders as a last resort. They're also top 4 for defending ball movement in the last 5 matches, which is not what we want to hear because we're struggling to move the ball. And if you saw that third quarter, some of the second quarter against the Bombers, we could not own territory. I think, remembering the stat in the third quarter, Essendon had about 70% time in forward half. So, yeah, scary thoughts. But hopefully we can just throw this all out of the fucking window and forget about that, put it in the trash, and hopefully we can give us a different look. But 17 games in, we have a decent sample size of what we should typically expect. And lastly, the Cats are top 2 for tackles in the game. Collingwood had only 40 against Essendon, so we talk about lack of pressure. And when Essendon are being able to freely play keepings off, you're not going to have many opportunities to tackle because the game is out of the contest and is in free-flowing space. So it becomes a game of touch footy by that point, and that's what we saw through bits and pieces of the Collingwood and Essendon game. Moving into the Hawks versus the Cats, who played on a Saturday afternoon. Some key stats. The Cats were plus 18 in contested possession, so they brought the heat. They were plus 23 in inside 50s, so I think they had 63 inside 50s, so they killed the Hawks from the start, and they kept the Hawks to just 7 points from defensive half scores, which is Brilliant. Brilliant because it's a perfect, what's the word? It's a perfect blueprint if you want to beat the Pies. Volume of inside 50s, stifling the defensive half, ball movement, contested ball, and then you have Jeremy Cameron, the head of the snake, who we can't stop. So that's going to be fun, as I've pointed out to a few times already. Who are some of the key players in the game for Geelong against the Hawks? Tom Stewart spent 72% of his time in the midfield against the Hawks when it comes to centre-backs attendances. He also had 3 intercept marks. So seems like, I haven't watched many of his games, but it seems like he's either starting in the middle and then rolling back, or starting in the middle and then just playing a really defensively minded midfield role. But 26 touches along with those 3 intercept marks, he was incredible. And I think Geelong have sort of just rolled the dice with Stewart. He wasn't playing very well as a defender this year, at least for the last 5 games before his move into the midfield. And maybe more so, guys, the fact that they were struggling so much in the midfield rather than Tom Stewart not playing so well. So I'll probably go with that. And they're just trying to add some star power into that midfield, and it's worked recently. And then Brad Close was the highest rated player for the game. He had 14 disposals, 4 goals, a goal assist. And we know Champion Data loves efficiency. He had 4 goals, kicked them all straight, no behind. So that helps your case when you're, I guess, being considered one of the best players according to Champion Data. And then Jeremy Cameron had 4 goals, 4 behind, so quite wasteful, which he has been in these last 4 games. He had 25 shots, 10 behinds, and 11 goals. So 4 of his shots haven't registered a score, while 10 of them have been behinds and 11 of them in goals. So he's getting a great number of looks at goal in his last 4 games. He's starting to show form that he was showing early in the year when Geelong had that run. So that's another concern. And yeah, let me tell you in a moment, we're getting there. Let me tell you who I think we should play Jeremy Cameron on. So, fringe players and selection. Guys, I'm doing this an hour before the VFL game, so I'm not going to be able to refer to those games. I've got quite a few things on the next couple of days, so I thought I'd get this preview out as early as possible, and in doing so, I've had to do this before the VFL game. Just keep an eye on Isaac Quaynor. I'm not saying he's going to get dropped this week. I'm not saying he's going to get dropped the next week, but he's not playing the way he did last season. He's not intercepting as well. He's not fighting the ball as much. He was shifted onto the wing. Now, you could make the argument that Fly wants or has been wanting IQ to play wing, and it was a good opportunity to do so on the weekend. Or, just to play devil's advocate, it could have been Fly saying, geez, we're not getting what we wanted out of IQ like we did last year. Let's put him on the wing and see what he does with that space and his speed, his acceleration. And he didn't set the world afire. He looked promising at the start and then just fizzled out. So just keep an eye on him. I'm not saying he's going to get dropped, but he's just under my microscope, just quietly. Now, you guys have waited long enough. Who do I want Jeremy Cameron to play on? I want Nathan Kruger. I want Darcy Moore. Fuck it off into the forward line. You can't keep playing him in the back line in this form. You just can't. You're not doing us any favours, you're not doing the team any favours, and you're not doing Darcy Moore any favours by keeping Darcy in the back line. He needs to play freely, and you can't play freely in the back line when you're out of form. You need to be accountable, confident, and you can't be hesitant. He is all of those right now. Put him in the forward line, get Nathan Kruger in the back. Krugs, when he played ruck in bits and pieces against Essendon, set up quite well behind the ball a few times. Would have had an intercept mark or 2 there as well, and looked good. He was deemed to be a backman at Geelong before he moved here at some point. Give him a chance. 6'5", quite fast, young, still wants to put an imprint on the game, and what better role than the role that can be assigned to Nathan Kruger on Friday night against Jeremy Cameron. Darcy Moore doesn't have an answer for Jeremy Cameron. He's too fast. He's kicked fucking 7 goals against us last time we played him, and he's always had our number. Give him a different look. Give him Nathan Kruger. Let's talk about some of the other selections. So John Noble needs to come in, right? I liked Markov. I liked Sidebottom. So you're either looking at Long or Markov coming out for a John Noble. Or does Fly say, no, Markov played well. He had his 20 touches, intercept mark. He was quite useful with his ball distribution. So do you honour that, and do you honour Ned Long's form coming in, 9 disposals, 4 score involvements, 1 goal assist, 3 tackles? It'd be stiff to drop Ned Long, but it'd also be stiff to drop Markov. So who comes in? Who does Noble come in for? So that'll be interesting. Myercheck, maybe a Reef McInnes, yeah? And then, so with this whole shift that I was mentioning with Darcy Moore, right? So how this happens is what's going to happen is Jeremy Howe is going to come into the back line. Frampton is going to get dropped for Josh Eyre. So it's Josh Eyre and Darcy Moore as the 2 talls, potentially. And then you have Nathan Kruger covering in the back line with your Jeremy Howe and Braden Maynard. And Charlie Dean, of course. Lastly, onto the matchups. Now, we talked about Nathan Kruger versus Jeremy Cameron. Let's talk about Sam de Koning versus Darcy Cameron. Hopefully, Darcy Cameron gets to the starting line on Friday. Sam de Koning is not going to be a ruckman who beats you in the hitouts. So Darcy Cameron will have a leg over him there, but it will be interesting around the grounds. Sam de Koning knows how to, find the ball, take a good mark. Darcy Cameron can do both. I think Sam de Koning's been averaging 20 disposals as a ruckman in his last 3 games since he started there against Carlton. So I do look forward to that. And then lastly, Max Holmes off the half-back flank since Danger has returned. He mainly played as a midfielder, or at least had more time in midfield than he does now. So he's basically returned full-time to the half-back, maybe a wing role as well. I haven't watched enough games, but that's where I would say he's been playing since Danger's come back. And he leads the coaches' votes for Geelong. So with those players in consideration, can we do a number on them? But ultimately, we just need a team performance. With the game against Essendon, you could point out to a couple issues early on, and then it just compounded. And when things compound, you could pause the game every 30 seconds and say, this is what went wrong here, this is what went wrong here. It's all redundant to me at that point. Something needs to change, and I don't know if a review of the game is going to help. I think it's a lot to do with what goes on between the 2 big ears. So hopefully Fly can address that for Friday. Go Pies.